Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. Hope you're all doing awesome today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. My aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck, and her life fell apart. Sorry if anything is misspelled, I have horrific dyslexia. My aunt was one of two kids my grandparents had. My mother was the polar opposite to my aunt. She worked from the age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job till the age of 26, was constantly stealing from her parents, and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. Didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did, my grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mom and her kids, unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mom would visit her was because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004, and a few months after, my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold and the money split 25% each to my mom and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. In 2010, my mom died after an accident, and did not have a current will in place. As she no longer had her business and was renting a house, she didn't have anything of much monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she have passed away, but had told me everything she wanted: the music, the flowers, the coffin color, and what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colors. So when she passed, my aunt and nan took over all the arrangements, and tried to undo all the things I'd told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew mom didn't like. The flowers were going to be all the wrong colors, and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few of the things back to what they were supposed to be, but the coffin couldn't be changed, for some reason. And my nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, as she said, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by her aunt that she didn't have any involvement with the writing of the will, and her nan told us that she changed it so that mom's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After mom passed away, my nan just stopped talking about my mom. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter, but even 5 years after mom passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about mom, nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her crappy kids had it. And if you went to talk to her about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I had suffered a mental breakdown after my mom's death, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear. Well, X has had it so much worse. In 2016, my nan passed away. She had written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral, and it was basically all the same things she had picked out for my mom's funeral, even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral, using my mom as the stand-in, but it was obvious that's what she was trying to do. So after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading, and my aunt kept telling me, "Oh, it'll be another month before we can do the reading." I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start uni, so it would be a hell of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will and asked what was happening. The solicitor let it slip that the will had already been read, and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will, and it confirmed what we already knew. The house, and all its contents, were now my aunt's. This included my granddad's war medals. He fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he had promised them to me before he died, she said, "Well, unless you have it in writing, you will have nothing in this house. Anyway, I already gave them to Clive." My heart sank. Clive was her eldest son, and the dictionary definition of a f***up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing drugs. I knew that the moment that prick had got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000. She had pissed off too many people in our town, so she was going to sell the house and move closer to her daughter, who lives in a big city. An offer was made on the house, and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city, and I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues, and oh boy were there. Turns out that the land the house was built on was way too soft for the type of house it was, and it was sinking. It has sunk about 2 centimeters in the 40+ years my nan and granddad had lived there, but the sinking was accelerating to 1 centimeter per year. This meant that within the next 3 years, the house would need some serious work, or be knocked down. The new value of the house? £60,000. The buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy her new house, but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he had trashed every single one he had ever been given. Someone reported this, and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home, as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with her craphead son and her partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she would try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time, as I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to die for having an R-word like you." In the middle of a busy street, someone reported her to the police, and she had an official warning from them, and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000 and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends, and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home, let's call her Sue, but they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house, while my aunt looked for a job and a home to rent. Even with £85,000, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her account. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, Sue and my aunt got into a screaming match, and my aunt said something along the lines of, "I should have aborted you." Sue immediately kicked her out of her house. So again, there's my aunt in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last bridge she had, a smoldering wreck. Last anyone has heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering from early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get joy out of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. Hotel knockout. I got to see this one a few days ago at a motel I spent a couple days at while my truck got fixed while on a road trip. It was a little place in a small town, part of a budget chain. The room was cheap, clean, and several restaurants were within walking distance. The staff were all locals, and it was a small staff team. A couple of desk clerks, a handful of young housekeepers, and 2 guys who did maintenance and grounds work, keeping the place up. I've worked all of my life, so I go out of my way to be nice to other working folks. My housekeeper/maid was a pretty young thing in her early 20s. I'll call Jenny. She was a sweet kid who did her job and impressed me by how efficiently she did her job, and was very nice when I asked about extra towels. The problem came in the form of a group of young women who were, quote, flight attendant trainees. There was a company down the road that ordered a block of rooms for these young women who were training to be flight attendants. I think the training school was a scam. I've never heard of an airline who didn't interview and hire their own flight attendants. This was a small motel in a smaller town, but I got to know and dislike these young women quickly, as did the rest of the motel staff and several nearby businesses. These young women came in with an attitude that amazed me. They were loud, rude, and nasty to everyone, from the front desk to housekeeping to other guests. They complained about everything from the lack of a bar to the number of TV channels. Anyone who so much as looked in their direction was hitting on them. But the point of this tale is when the flight attendant trainee in the room next to mine started raising hell about the room being filthy. I was outside my room on the landing, overlooking the parking lot, when the door flies open and the girl storms out. I turned around when the door banged against the wall and could see that the room was trashed. The housekeeper was making her way towards our rooms with her cart to vacuum. This trainee is wearing skin-tight designer jeans and a tank top, and starts screaming at the housekeeper that she'd better get her ass in her room and clean it properly, or else. She goes on to scream that there have been soda bottles and fast food trash in the room for a week. The housekeepers in this place wear jeans and tanks in the summer, and have a light smock with the motel's name, their name, and housekeeping on it. The entitled trainee almost exploded when the housekeeper got there with her cart, looked into the room, and politely informed the girl that the hotel's policy was that housekeeping was not allowed to remove anything from a guest's room that was not in the trash can. She told her that they are not allowed to assume that anything in the room was trash. I thought the trainee was going to explode. She instantly started with the, "When I get done with your manager, you'll be looking for a new job, you lazy bitch." She stormed off to the office and came back even madder, after I assume being told that the policy was exactly what the housekeeper had told her. But when the trainee came back, she was determined to have a confrontation. By this time, Jenny was vacuuming my carpet and had already emptied my trash can. I stood outside while she worked, as this was a safety policy, to protect the maids from male guests who might have good intentions. The housekeeper made up the bed and cleaned the bathroom, and I was told it was done. I thanked her and started to step inside my room, when Jenny went next door to the trainee's room. The minute she stepped inside the door, I heard the sound of glass breaking, and I backed out the door to see what was happening. The trainee was standing in the middle of the room, picking up glass soda bottles from the furniture and dropping them on the floor to break against the ones she had already dropped, while demanding that Jenny get down on her hands and knees and clean up the broken glass. When the pretty blonde smiled and told her that she wasn't allowed to touch anything that wasn't in the trash basket, the trainee lost her mind, stormed towards the housekeeper and threw a punch. Unfortunately, Jenny was agile, ducked under the hard punch, and the entitled trainee slammed her fist into a steel motel room door and managed to hurt her wrist and hand. The trainee went to the office screaming that the housekeeper had assaulted her and returned with the manager, who was also the owner, demanding Jenny be fired. The manager asked what happened, and the trainee screamed that she'd been assaulted. Jenny told her side, and I introduced myself and told the manager that I was standing on the deck outside the rooms and saw what happened when I heard glass breaking. I explained that the girl hurt herself by throwing a punch at his employee. That was all it took. The trainee was told to pack and get out before he called the police and have her arrested for assaulting his employee. The girl was furious and going on about suing them and the chain they were part of. When I checked out later that day, I left Jenny a nice tip in my room, and I asked the manager what happened to the flight attendant trainee. It seems she sprained her wrist and broke 2 bones in her hand. She called the police, and they told her that punching a steel door is not the motel's fault. The manager also found out that the flight attendant training school was shut down for not having the proper certifications to offer job training in that state. That is it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Be sure to drop a like, I'd really appreciate it. And also, subscribe for more. And with that, I'm out of here, so until next time.